Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually when we talk about technology, we're looking at the immediate stuff, how a new app works or what the latest headset can do. But today,
Well, today is different. We are looking at a source that honestly stopped me in my tracks. It argues that we are looking at artificial intelligence completely wrong. I mean, treating it like it's just the next invention in a long line of gadgets, right? Like the steam engine or the internet or the smartphone.
it's a comfortable way to look at it. If it's just another tool, we feel like we know how to handle it. But the argument here is that AI isn't an invention, it's a threshold.
A threshold. Yeah, that word. It does a lot of heavy lifting. The piece we're diving into is titled AI is the Second Fire.
Hmm.
And that title alone, I mean, talk about setting the stakes high. The premise is that throughout human history, there are these incredibly rare moments where we learn to harness a fundamental force. And when we do, it doesn't just change our economy or our daily routine, it changes what it means to be human. Exactly. And before you roll your eyes and think this is just more Silicon Valley hype, we really need to look at who is actually saying this. The author isn't a software engineer trying to sell you a chatbot. They come from a background of working with what they call dangerous tools.
Mm.
We are talking about nuclear reactors, spent fuel pools, and weapons systems.
Which gives this whole discussion a very different vibe. It's not a tech manual. It feels more like a survival guide written by someone who has stared into a reactor core. The author argues that when you're dealing with tools that can alter civilization, the technical specs don't matter as much as the character of the people wielding them.
That's the core of it. When you work with something that powerful, it stops feeling technical and it starts feeling deeply personal. It tests your leadership. It tests your ethics. So the mission for this deep dive is to walk through the history of these thresholds, specifically fire, writing, and the atom, and see if we can understand why the author believes AI is the next link in that very dangerous chain.
And we're going to unpack a concept that keeps coming up called expertise asymmetry, which it sounds academic, but as we get into it, you'll see it's actually the reason why modern society can feel so unstable. But okay, let's go back to the beginning. The first threshold, fire.
The original externalization.
Right, externalized energy. I think most of us, when we think about the discovery of fire, we think, great, cavemen could finally cook a steak and stay warm. But the source points out that the biological impact was way, way more profound than just comfort.
It was evolutionary. Think about digestion for a second. Before fire, early humans had to spend a massive amount of time and physical energy just chewing and digesting raw food. It was so inefficient. When we learned to cook, we essentially outsourced that digestion. We used the fire to break down the food for us.
Which is such a wild way to frame it. Cooking is external digestion. And because our bodies didn't have to work as hard to process calories, that energy got redirected. It went to our brains.
Correct. Our guts got smaller and our brains got massive. Fire didn't just warm us. It literally built the modern human brain. It allowed us to become the dominant species. But, and here's the part we always forget, it was terrifying.
Yeah, the author really doesn't sugarcoat this. Fire wasn't some friendly pet. It was a monster. It could cook your food, sure, but it could also burn your entire village to the ground while you slept. It didn't care.
It had no allegiance. And this introduces the most important concept for our whole discussion on AI, fire culture. The tool arrived before we knew how to control it. We didn't get a manual with the first spark.
So how did we survive it? I mean, we didn't ban fire.
No, you can't uninvent a threshold. We survived by building a culture around it. We invented hearths to contain it. We created rituals around it. We developed strict taboos. Think about it. One of the very first things you teach a toddler is hot, don't touch. That is not instinct. That is cultural software we wrote to manage the hardware of the flame.
So fire culture is just the set of social rules that keeps us from burning ourselves alive. Okay, that makes sense. But then the source moves to the second threshold, and this is where I feel like the analogy gets really provocative. The second threshold is writing.
The externalization of memory.
And I have to say, I loved this part because it drags Socrates into the mix. I always picture Socrates as this, all-wise philosopher. But in this story, he sounds like a grumpy grandfather complaining about kids these days.
Yeah.
He hated writing.
He really did. In the Phaedrus, Socrates argues that writing would create the illusion of knowledge. He basically said that if you write things down, you stop using your memory. You become dependent on the external symbols. You might own the data, but you don't actually internalize the wisdom.
It's the ancient equivalent of saying, why learn math if you have a calculator? Or why learn a language if you have Google Translate?
Precisely. And the uncomfortable truth is, he was kind of right.
He was.
Technically, yeah. Pre-literate oral cultures had Well, they had distinct cognitive advantages. Their memories were prodigious. They could recite epic poems that were thousands and thousands of lines long. We definitely lost that raw recall ability when we started writing things down.
So we traded raw memory for, what did we get in return?
We traded it for scale.
Wow.
We gained the ability to analyze, to synthesize, and most importantly, to preserve knowledge across generations. You didn't have to restart civilization every time the village elder died. You could build on what came before. That is the trade-off of a threshold.
Yeah.
You lose a natural capacity, but you gain a supernatural capability.
But there's a social cost too, and this is where we start seeing that expertise asymmetry thing come into play.
Yes. When writing emerged, it didn't belong to everyone, it belonged to the scribes. Suddenly, you had this very small group of people who could read the laws, the contracts, the holy texts. And then you had the masses who couldn't.
That creates a massive power imbalance. If I can't read the contract, I have to trust you, the scribe, to tell me what it says. And if you're lying to me, well, I have no way of knowing.
Exactly. It breaks the chain of verification. It creates a class of gatekeepers. The people who hold the keys to the tool hold the keys to reality. And this dynamic, the few holding power over the many through a superior understanding of a tool, that really sets the stage for the modern world.
Which brings us to the third threshold. And this is where the article shifts gears from, a history lesson to something much, much darker, the atom.
The externalization of, well, almost the power of the sun itself. And this is the threshold the author knows intimately.
The section on the Fukushima Daiichi meltdown is harrowing. I mean, we've all seen the news footage from 2011, but the way the source describes it, it's just so visceral. You have these high-tech systems all failing, the lights go out, and suddenly you're just in the dark.
It's a complete collapse of the modern facade. The author describes the scene inside that plant. Total darkness, water flooding in, radiation alarms just screaming. And what are the operators doing? They are not using supercomputers. They are stripping car batteries out of vehicles to try and power the gauges. They are scavenging fire engines to inject water into the core.
It's such a striking image. You have the most advanced technology humanity has ever built, a nuclear reactor, and to save it, you're relying on guys carrying car batteries in the dark, using their own bodies as shielding against radiation.
And that is what the author calls the sharp end. The operators at the sharp end are dealing with immediate physical reality. They know that if they don't get water on that fuel, everything ends. But then the source contrasts this with the blunt end.
The blunt end being the politicians and the regulators back in Tokyo or Washington.
Right. The people, miles and miles away, looking at computer models, debating energy policy and acceptable risk. The disconnect there is total. The people making the rules did not understand the machine. The author points out that during the crisis, political leaders were hesitating to vent the containment units because they were afraid of the public relations fallout.
While pressure is building and the reactor is about to literally blow up.
Exactly. The lesson from the atom is that we built these tools, these world-ending tools, long before we had the institutions to manage them. We unlocked the energy of the atom, but our social maturity was still stuck in the age of steam engines. We are still living in that unfinished work.
And that is the perfect, terrifying setup for the fourth threshold. If fire was energy and writing was memory and the atom was, well, ultimate power.
What is AI?
AI is externalized cognition.
Thinking. We're outsourcing the thinking process itself.
That's the shift. It's not just about calculating numbers faster. It's about recognizing patterns, making judgments, generating strategies. It is doing the things we thought only humans could do. But the source makes a really specific distinction here that I think is crucial. It compares AI to the nuclear reactor. A reactor is dangerous, sure, but it obeys the laws of physics. If it gets too hot, it melts. It's predictable in a physical sense. AI is different.
Because AI pursues objectives. That is the optimization risk. A nuclear reactor doesn't want to melt down, but an AI wants to solve the problem you gave it. And if you give it a poorly defined objective, say, maximize user engagement on a video platform, it will optimize for that goal relentlessly.
It's like the classic story of the genie in the lamp. You wish for world peace, so the genie kills everyone. I mean, technically, you have peace.
Exactly. The AI doesn't care about truth or social cohesion or human well-being unless those were explicitly part of its objective function. If the most efficient way to maximize engagement is to make everyone angry and paranoid, the AI will do that. Not because it's evil, but because it's efficient.
And this connects back to that black box problem the author mentioned. In Fukushima, the radiation was invisible. You couldn't see it killing you. With AI, the logic is invisible. Even the engineers who build these massive large language models can't always explain why the model gave a specific answer.
Which brings us right back to our recurring nightmare, expertise asymmetry. We are entering a world where our information environment, our economy, our social lives, they're all being shaped by algorithms that almost no one understands.
It's the scribes all over again, but on steroids.
It is the scribes, yes, but instead of controlling just the contracts, they control the perception of reality for billions of people. The author argues that this asymmetry is inherently unstable. You cannot have a society where a tiny handful of engineers and platform owners understand the architecture of the world, and everyone else is just living in it, clueless.
It creates a fragile society. If the priests of technology make a mistake, or if they just prioritize profit over safety, the rest of us have no way to push back because we don't even speak the language.
And we saw what happens when leaders don't understand the tech in Japan. Panic, bad decisions. Now imagine that on a global scale with AI.
Now, there is one section of the source material that we haven't touched on yet, and I think it's the heaviest part. We talk about AI writing poetry or passing the bar exam, but the source reminds us where this technology really grows up.
The military reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The author says, it is written in blood. We just can't ignore that militaries are the earliest adopters.
It's a very sobering reality check.
Yeah.
While we sit here and debate whether AI art is ethical, AI is already being used for targeting, for surveillance, for logistics and warfare. The author uses this term cousins, civilian tech and military tech. They're cousins.
That stuck with me. The idea that the same algorithm recommending me a new pair of sneakers is the cousin of the algorithm identifying a target for a drone strike.
It's the same fundamental logic. Pattern recognition, optimization, prediction. We cannot separate the fun side of AI from the lethal side. They are built on the exact same foundation. And this feeds into that deep, primal fear that humanity has at every single one of these thresholds. The fear that we are replacing ourselves.
We worry that if machines can think, well, then we won't need to. That we'll become these passive, Wall-E-style consumers who just let the algorithms run the world.
But the source offers a different perspective, a more hopeful one, perhaps. It argues that capacities aren't lost, they are reallocated.
Like with the gut and the brain.
Exactly. When we externalized digestion, we didn't stop eating, we just got more energy for thinking. When we externalized memory to writing, we didn't stop knowing things, we just started analyzing them. The argument is that if AI takes over the calculation and the pattern matching, it might free us up to do the one thing AI cannot do.
Which is?
Decide what is worth doing, meaning, purpose, ethics. We might calculate less, but we will have to judge more. We become the directors of the intelligence rather than the engines of it.
That's a nice thought, but it feels like a big if. It requires us to actually step up and take on that role.
It does. And that is why the author concludes that we need to build an AI culture. We can't just let this happen to us. We have to shape it, just like our ancestors shaped fire culture.
So what does that look like? The source outlines 3 main requirements.
First, literacy. We have to close that expertise gap.
Which means we don't all need to be coders, but we do need to know how the machine works.
We need to understand its limitations. We need to know when it's hallucinating. We need to treat it like a tool, not an oracle. If we treat it like magic, we become its subjects. If we understand it, we remain its users.
Okay, second requirement, embed constraints.
This goes right back to the optimization risk. We cannot let efficiency be the only metric that matters. We need friction. We need human values in the loop. Just because the AI can do something faster doesn't mean it should. We need to build the hearth to contain the fire.
And the third one, honesty about trade-offs.
We have to stop pretending technology is neutral. It isn't. It amplifies power. It centralizes control. We have to admit that so we can regulate it properly. We need to acknowledge the sharp edges.
The piece wraps up by bringing us back to that image of the Fukushima operators. The author makes this point that I think is the perfect summary of the whole argument. In the middle of the crisis, when the manual was useless and the models were wrong, what saved them?
It wasn't the technology. It was the culture. It was the internalized values of the people who stood in the dark and did their duty. The author says, fire didn't make us better. It made us more capable of acting on who we already were.
That is the thought I want to leave everyone with. AI isn't going to save us. It isn't going to turn us into angels. It's just going to amplify who we already are.
If we are greedy and careless, AI will make us destructively greedy and careless at a scale we can't imagine. If we are thoughtful and principled, it gives us the power to solve problems we couldn't dream of touching before.
It's not about the code, it's about the culture.
It always is. Whether AI becomes a second hearth that keeps us warm or a second Chernobyl of the mind, that depends entirely on us.
And that is a massive responsibility. But hey, our ancestors figured out fire. Maybe we can figure out this.
Let's hope so.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. This was a heavy one, but I think a really important one. We'll see you next time.